The transmission came in garbled. Half the syllables were eaten by static, the carrier wave stuttering across 3 frequencies it had no business touching, and by the time the signal resolved into something the console could parse, Commander Lyra Vasquez had already set down her coffee and leaned forward in her chair. "Say again, unidentified caller. You are transmitting on Terran Emergency Band 7. Authenticate or repeat your last." Nothing came back but the grinding hiss of corrupted data. Vasquez pulled up the waveform display on her secondary screen. The signal was a mess, fragmented, auto-compressed, routed through at least 4 relay bounces before it landed on her board. The origin tag was missing. The authentication header was blank. But buried in the static, repeating on a 12-second loop, was the unmistakable triple pulse cadence of a universal distress beacon. Someone was dying out there. She keyed the decode filter and let the system chew on it while she pulled up the sector map. Her station, Terran Emergency Coordination Post 14, a 2-person outpost bolted to the side of an asteroid in the Palladian Drift, handled maybe 1 real call per month. The rest was debris alerts, mining claim squabbles, and the occasional drunken cargo hauler who forgot to disable his test transponder. TECP-14 was not a command post. It was a listening post at the edge of human-administered space, and the only reason it existed was that someone in the Terran Maritime Authority's Office of Emergency Compliance had read a Regulation Maritime Directive 1102, Paragraph 9, Subsection C, that said emergency monitoring coverage must extend to the boundaries of treaty-recognized patrol corridors, regardless of the expected call volume, regardless of the staffing cost, regardless of whether anyone in the entire sector had ever used it. Vasquez was Subsection C. Her and Petty Officer Des Akafer, who was currently in the maintenance bay replacing a water filter that had been making a grinding noise for 6 days. She'd filed the maintenance request with Regional Supply. Regional Supply had logged the request. Nobody had sent a filter. Akafer had fabricated one from a decommissioned atmospheric scrubber unit. That was life on TECP-14. The decoder chimed. Partial reconstruction. She read what it gave her. Vessel designation. Corrupted class. Bulk freighter cargo manifest. Corrupted hazardous volatile engine status, total failure trajectory, fixed ballistic impact estimate, Halcyon Ring commercial platform time to impact, 003917 requesting emergency intercept from VETHANI Trade Authority Sector Coordination. Repeat requesting VETHANI intercept. Vasquez read it twice. Then she read it a 3rd time because the numbers didn't make sense in any configuration that ended well. A bulk freighter, engines dead, carrying something volatile. On a fixed ballistic trajectory toward Halcyon Ring, a commercial docking platform that, according to her nav database, currently housed approximately 6,000 residents and transient merchants, plus whatever ships were berthed in its external cradles. 39 minutes. And the distress call was addressed to the Vethani Trade Authority. Not to her, not to TECP-14, not to any human station anywhere. The SOS had been aimed at the Vethani, whose sector coordination center sat 11 light-minutes spinward, and who were, by every treaty and jurisdictional boundary that existed, the responsible authority for that corridor. The signal had no business being on Terran Emergency Band 7. It had gotten there because somewhere between the dying freighter and the Vethani relay network, the carrier wave had degraded, bounced off a deprecated subspace repeater that nobody had decommissioned, and auto-routed itself through Earth's deep-range emergency network like water finding a crack in a pipe. It was not her call. She stared at the decoded text for exactly 3 seconds. The coffee in her mug was still warm. The asteroid outside the viewport was still slowly rotating, the same view of the same gray rock face she'd watched for the last 14 months of her posting. Nothing about this morning was supposed to be different from any other. Then she pulled up the fleet status board. The nearest Terran vessel of any kind was the TSV Resolute, a search and rescue cutter, 62 meters long, crew of 19, currently running a patrol loop through the Palladian Drift. She checked the Resolute's position against the nav overlay, 14 minutes out from Halcyon Ring at full burn. She checked the Vethani response board next, pulling from the shared frequency diplomatic feed that all treaty signatories had access to. The Vethani were the legitimate authority here. The Palladian Drift fell entirely within their sector coordination zone under the Kethsoro Compact. Human vessels had transit rights but no emergency jurisdiction. Any human response to a Vethani-flagged emergency was technically a diplomatic act. The Vethani Sector Coordination Center had received the same distress call, the clean version, the one that had actually been addressed to them, with proper headers and proper authentication. Their nearest intercept-capable vessel was the patrol cruiser Solen's Grace, currently stationed at a refueling depot at Kethsoro. Estimated arrival at Halcyon Ring, 51 minutes. 12 minutes after impact. The math was simple and it was merciless. The correct response from the correct authority, following the correct procedures, would arrive 12 minutes too late. The response that could arrive in time was incorrect in every possible dimension: wrong jurisdiction, wrong species, wrong chain of command, never even asked for. Vasquez stared at the two numbers on her screen. 14 minutes, 51 minutes, two numbers. One was the gap between 6,000 people living and 6,000 people dying. She keyed the comm. TECP-14 to TSV Resolute Priority 1. Commander Vasquez transmitting. I have a situation. The response came in 4 seconds. Resolute actual, go ahead. I'm forwarding you a decoded distress signal. Bulk freighter, engines dead, ballistic trajectory, impact with Halcyon Ring commercial platform, and she glanced at the countdown timer she'd started on the corner of her screen. 38 minutes 11 seconds. Cargo is flagged hazardous volatile, manifest corrupted, specifics unknown. The SOS was addressed to the Vethani Trade Authority. It reached us through a routing error. Silence on the line, 3 seconds, 4. Resolute actual copies. Understand the call is not addressed to us. Confirmed. Vethani nearest intercept is 51 minutes out. Another pause. Vasquez could hear the background hum of the Resolute's bridge, the ventilation system, the quiet chirp of a nav console updating, someone checking a readout in the middle distance. Resolute actual to TECP-14. We are altering course for Halcyon Ring. Full burn. ETA 14 minutes. Vasquez exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. Copy, Resolute. I'll coordinate from here, forwarding all decoded signal data now. One more thing, Commander. Go ahead. You said cargo is hazardous volatile with a corrupted manifest. Do we know what's on that freighter? Negative. I'm working on it. She cut the channel and turned to the decode filter again. The system had pulled another fragment from the garbled transmission, a partial cargo manifest entry. 3 lines of Vethani trade standard notation that she had to cross-reference against a commercial database she barely knew how to navigate. Akafor appeared in the doorway, water filter in hand, grease on his forehead. I heard Priority 1. What have we got? Runaway freighter about to hit a station with 6,000 people on it. The call went to the Vethani but landed on our board instead. The Resolute's inbound. I need you on the cargo manifest. It's in Vethani notation, and I can't read it fast enough. Akafor set the filter down without a word, wiped his hands on his coveralls, and dropped into the secondary console chair. Within 30 seconds, he had the fragment up on his screen and was cross-referencing it against the Palladian Drift commercial shipping registry. Vasquez, he said after less than a minute. His voice had gone flat. Talk to me. The cargo designation translates to thermite catalyst compound, industrial grade, used in orbital construction for cutting through heavy alloy plating. He paused. There's a volume marker here. If I'm reading this right, the freighter is carrying 1,100 metric tons of it. Vasquez turned slowly in her chair and looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them said anything for a moment because the math was doing the talking. 1,100 tons of thermite catalyst on a ballistic course toward a civilian station. If that freighter impacts Halcyon Ring with its cargo intact, the kinetic energy alone will breach the hull. The thermite compound ignites on structural deformation it's designed to. It's a cutting agent. That's the whole point. We're not looking at a collision, Commander. We're looking at an incendiary event that will gut the station from the inside out. 36 minutes on the clock. Vasquez opened the broadband channel. TECP-14 to all vessels and stations on Terran Emergency Band 7. This is Commander Lyra Vasquez declaring a Grade 1 emergency. Bulk freighter on ballistic impact course with Halcyon Ring commercial platform. Cargo, 1,100 metric tons thermite catalyst compound. Time to impact, 36 minutes. Any vessel with intercept or deflection capability, respond on this channel immediately. The first response came from the Resolute. Resolute copies Grade 1. We are 12 minutes out. Request tactical brief on the freighter's mass and approach vector. The second came from a voice Vasquez didn't recognize. This is Captain Teague, Terran Maritime Authority Emergency Tug Briarwood, currently at Hessler Station. We are 9 minutes from Halcyon Ring, but we are a 60-ton tug, Commander. If that freighter masses what I think it does, we cannot deflect it alone. Briarwood, what can you do? We can attach and provide lateral thrust. It won't stop it, might bend the trajectory a few degrees. A few degrees might be the difference between a hit and a miss. Get moving. Already burning, Commander. ETA 9 minutes, Teague out. A fourth vessel checked in a civilian mining hauler, the Maddox Crest, about 20 minutes away. Commander, we're a rock hauler, but we've got a tractor array rated for 200 tons. If you need another set of hands. Maddox Crest, I appreciate the offer. Stand by on this frequency. If I need you, I'll call. Standing by. A third response to the Grade 1 came a moment later, and this one wasn't Terran. TECP-14, this is Dockmaster Irth Solen, Halcyon Ring Station Control. We are receiving your broadband declaration. Please confirm the distress signal from the freighter Cathali's Dawn was transmitted to the Vethani Trade Authority. Why is a human coordination post running this response? Vasquez glanced at the waveform display, where the garbled signal was still cycling on its 12-second loop, endlessly repeating its call for help to an authority that couldn't get there in time. Dockmaster Solen, the signal degraded in transit and auto-routed through our emergency network. We intercepted it. We're responding because we can get there before impact. The Vethani response is en route, but their ETA is 51 minutes. A beat of silence. When Solen spoke, her voice carried the precise, clipped diction of someone who managed 6,000 lives on a commercial platform and had never had to contemplate losing them all in less than an hour. You were not the intended recipient of this signal. No, ma'am, we were not. Your jurisdiction does not extend to Vethani-flagged vessels operating in Vethani-administered corridors. No, ma'am, it does not. Then on what authority are you dispatching? On the authority of 35 minutes and a 6,000-person station in the impact path, Dockmaster. I have 2 ships that can reach the freighter before it reaches your station. Would you like me to stand them down? The silence lasted 4 seconds. When Solen came back, the formal rigidity in her voice had cracked just slightly. No, I would not. Then I need everything you can give me on the Cathali's Dawn. Mass, hull configuration, structural weak points, cargo stowage layout, anything. Transmitting now. The data arrived in a clean burst proper Vethani formatting, well organized, every field populated. Vasquez had to give the dockmaster credit. The woman was staring down the annihilation of her station, and she was still filing proper data packets with correct header blocks. The freighter Cathalis Dawn. Vethani-built bulk hauler, Class 3 commercial license, 960 tons dry mass, plus the 1,100 tons of thermite catalyst cargo. Total mass just over 2,000 tons, moving at 400 meters per second along a trajectory that put it dead center on Halcyon Ring's commercial docking arm. The engine failure had been a cascade fault in the reactor cooling system when the reactor emergency scrammed. It took main engines and all maneuvering thrusters offline simultaneously. The crew, 3 Vethani nationals, had transmitted their SOS and evacuated in the freighter's escape pod before the full ballistic trajectory was even computed. The escape pod's transponder was active, drifting about 40 kilometers behind the freighter. 3 souls in a tin can with a 12-hour air supply, watching their ship sail away from them toward a station full of people they'd probably traded with last week. Akafor cross-referenced the Cathalis Dawn's recent port records. She was berthed at Halcyon Ring 4 days ago, loaded the thermite catalyst cargo from a construction supply depot on the station's industrial level. The cargo was bound for a shipyard at Pelith 3. He paused. The freighter took on fuel at Halcyon Ring. Her crew ate at the station canteen. They filed their departure manifest with Dockmaster Solen's office. The crew had been at the station 4 days ago. They'd eaten there, filed papers there, passed through the corridors of the same docking arm their cargo was now hurtling toward. The impersonality of the physics made Vasquez's teeth tight. She ran the intercept numbers twice, then forwarded the full data package to the Resolute with a tactical overlay. Lieutenant Commander Asha Ren, the cutter's co, responded within a minute. TECP-14, Resolute Actual. We've reviewed the data. At 2,000 plus tons and 400 meters per second, we cannot physically stop this vessel. Our mass is insufficient for a head-on deflection, and we don't carry ordnance heavy enough to destroy it at safe distance without creating a debris field that would be equally dangerous to the station. Ordnance is off the table anyway. The thermite detonates on kinetic impact and structural deformation. Shooting the freighter doesn't neutralize the cargo. It fragments it. Instead of one large impact, you get a debris cloud of burning thermite fragments fanning across a wide dispersal cone, all of them heading toward the station. We'd turn a surgical problem into a scatter pattern that's harder to dodge. Agreed. I ran that scenario on the way in. The debris cone would cover the station's entire cross-section at this range. Destruction would be partial but widespread. The station survives as a structure but burns internally. So ordnance is out. What about partial deflection? I see the Briarwood is attaching for lateral thrust. A 60-ton tug against 2,000 tons of freighter will produce negligible angular change on its own. The Resolute is 420 tons better, but still not enough for a guaranteed clean miss at this range and closure rate. Even combined, we're pushing less than a quarter of the freighter's mass. The physics are not friendly. They don't have to be friendly. They just have to bend 2 degrees. Ren's voice shifted slightly, not warmer, sharper. The way someone sounds when they realize the person on the other end of the line has already done the math they were about to propose. Commander, what if we don't try to stop it? What if we change its angle by 2 degrees? Maybe 3, just enough to shift the impact point off the station. Vasquez had been running the same calculation in her head for the last 90 seconds. She'd gotten roughly the same answer Ren was about to give her, but she wanted to hear it from the ship that would have to execute it. Walk me through the math. If we attach to the freighter's dorsal hull with magnetic clamps and burn lateral at maximum sustained thrust, simultaneously with the Briarwood on the ventral side, we can produce a combined angular deflection of a pause. Someone in the background was running numbers on a dedicated terminal. 1.8 degrees over the remaining flight time. The current trajectory puts impact dead center on the docking arm. A 1.8 degree shift moves the projected impact point to approximately 400 meters off the station's port side. 400 meters, that's a miss. That's a miss. A near miss tight enough to cause hull stress from the shockwave when the freighter passes, and the thermite detonation at 400 meters will produce significant thermal damage to the station's exterior. But the core survives. The sheltered population survives. 31 minutes on the clock. Vasquez's hands were steady on the console. Her voice was steady too, and later she would not be able to explain why, because nothing about this situation should have produced steadiness. Do it, attach and burn, both vessels. Synchronized lateral thrust perpendicular to trajectory. Copy, TECP-14. Be advised, attaching to a ballistic vessel carrying 1,100 tons of volatile cargo at 400 meters per second involves significant risk to both crews. If the thermite detonates prematurely, or if the attachment produces structural stress that triggers the cargo. Understood, Resolute. The alternative is 6,000 people and a thermite fire visible from orbit. A beat, Resolute copies. All hands, condition red, prepare for emergency attachment operations. We'll be at the freighter in 9 minutes. Ran out. Vasquez let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding, then caught herself. She couldn't afford the luxury of relief yet. Relief was for after. Right now there were at least a dozen things that could still go wrong, and the clock wasn't interested in any of them. She switched channels. Briarwood, did you copy the plan? Copied it, Commander. We'll be at the freighter in 6. I'll rig our grapple lines and wait for the Resolute before we start the lateral burn. Synchronized is the only way the deflection math works. Confirmed. Keep this channel open. TECP-14 out. She leaned back in her chair for exactly 2 seconds. She allowed herself those 2 seconds because in 28 minutes the math would either work or it wouldn't, and the 2 seconds she spent now wouldn't change that. Then she sat forward again and pulled up the thermal modeling software that she'd used maybe twice in her entire career, both times for training exercises that she'd considered a waste of time. Akefer was watching her from the secondary console. His expression was the kind of calm that a person develops after enough years in the service, the outer layer holding steady while the inner layer is doing high-speed arithmetic on how bad things might get. You know this is insane, right? What you've just authorized. It's the only math that works, Des. We're asking a 62-meter SAR cutter and a harbor tug the size of my apartment to physically wrestle a 2,000-ton incendiary bomb away from a civilian space station, in someone else's jurisdiction, without orders from anyone above your pay grade, without even a request from the people whose station it is. They're not going to complain about jurisdiction if their station is still there, Des. They might complain about jurisdiction regardless. That's how bureaucracies work. But I'm not arguing with the decision. I'm just making sure you understand that everything we do from this point forward is going on a record that people in offices much nicer than this one are going to read very carefully. Noted. Can you model the thermal pulse radius for me? If the thermite goes off at 400 meters from the station, I need to know what the heat load looks like on the station's exterior hull and on any vessel within a 1,000-meter sphere. Akefer pulled up the thermodynamics module without another word. His fingers moved fast. After a minute, he had a projection on screen, a sphere of thermal energy expanding outward from the hypothetical detonation point, color-coded by intensity. At 400 meters, the station's exterior hull plating takes roughly 40% of its rated thermal tolerance. The reinforced core is well within margins. Anything within 200 meters of the detonation point is at risk of catastrophic thermal damage. 200 meters. The Resolute and the Briarwood need to detach and clear at least 200 meters before the thermite goes off. If the thermite goes off, it might not. The compound needs a deformation trigger or a heat source above 300 degrees Celsius. If the freighter just sails past the station and keeps going into open space, the cargo stays inert. Can we count on that? Okafor hesitated. The reactor scram left residual heat in the engineering section. The insulation between engineering and the cargo hold is rated for 90 minutes of passive thermal migration. The reactor scrammed approximately 52 minutes ago. So we have 38 minutes before the heat might reach the cargo. 38 minutes if the insulation is performing to spec. If it's degraded, if there's any breach in the thermal barrier, less. Add it to the briefing for the Resolute. They need to know that clock is running too. 26 minutes. Dockmaster Solen's voice came through again, tight and controlled. Commander Vasquez, Halcyon Ring is beginning evacuation procedures. Our lifeboat capacity is rated for 1,800. The remaining 4,400 will shelter in the station's reinforced core. Estimated time to complete core shelter, 15 minutes. Understood, Dockmaster. Keep them moving. We are also evacuating the docking arm, the projected impact zone. There are 2 vessels currently berthed there. One has departed under its own power. The second, a Vithani cargo shuttle with engine trouble, cannot depart. Its crew of 4 is being transferred to the station core by emergency pod. Copy. Is the docking arm clear of personnel? It will be in 8 minutes. Make it 6, Dockmaster. We will try. One more thing. Is there any way to jettison the berthed cargo shuttle remotely? If the freighter's trajectory clips the docking arm, the shuttle's fuel adds to the fire. The shuttle's fuel is a standard hydrogen-oxygen mix, perhaps 600 liters. Compared to 1,100 tons of thermite catalyst, Commander, it is the equivalent of a lit match next to a forest fire. Fair point. Focus on personnel. We are focused on nothing else. 22 minutes. The Briarwood reached the Cathalli's Dawn. Captain Teague's voice came through clipped and professional, the kind of tone that Vasquez recognized from people who had done hard things in tight spaces and had learned to compress their fear into something useful. Briarwood is alongside the freighter. She's a big girl, 960 tons dry, and she's rotating on her longitudinal axis, about 2 RPM. We're going to have to match the rotation before we can get a clean lock. Deploying grapple lines now. Vasquez watched the telemetry feed on her main display. The Briarwood was barely larger than a shuttle, a 60-ton harbor tug, designed for pushing disabled cargo pods and clearing debris from shipping lanes. Its grapple system was rated for objects up to 500 tons. The Cathalli's Dawn massed 4 times that. Briarwood, can your grapples hold at that mass differential? They'll hold for the burn, Commander. I've run overload scenarios on these grapples before, not quite at this ratio, but close. The lines are rated for 3 times their nominal load in static mode. Dynamic stress is a different story, but for a sustained lateral push, they should hold. Should. They will hold, Commander. Grapple 1 deployed locked. Grapple 2 deployed locked. We are attached to the freighter's ventral hull, forward of the cargo bay. I can feel her mass through the deck plates. This is a lot of ship. Acknowledged, Briarwood. Hold position and wait for the Resolute. Do not initiate lateral thrust on your own. The deflection math requires synchronized push from both sides of the hull. Understood. We'll sit tight. But Commander, I can feel this ship through my deck plates. She's heavy, she's cold, and she's carrying enough thermite to build a shipyard or burn one down. Just making sure everyone understands what we're strapped to. Everyone understands, Captain. Vasquez flagged the Cathalli's Dawn's escape pod on the broadband for the Vithani authorities. She also contacted the Maddox Crest, the civilian rock hauler that had offered its tractor array. Maddox Crest, new assignment. Vithani escape pod, 3 crew members, transponder active, drifting at coordinates I'm sending you now. Can you recover them? Copy TECP-14. We can reach the pod in about 22 minutes. Happy to help. Recover the crew and hold them safely. The Vithani authorities will coordinate their transfer when their patrol cruiser arrives. Understood. Maddox Crest en route to the escape pod. One more piece off the board. 3 Vithani crew members being recovered by a civilian hauler from a species they'd never asked for help from, pulled from the void by hands that had no jurisdictional reason to be reaching. Vasquez filed the coordination note and turned her attention back to the thermal migration data. Akafer had refined his model while she was on the comm, feeding the Cathalis Dawn's engineering telemetry into the thermodynamics module. The residual reactor heat was creeping through the insulation at a rate of roughly 1 degree per minute at the cargo side barrier. Current temperature at the barrier, 211 degrees Celsius. Ignition threshold for the thermite catalyst compound, 312 degrees. 101 degrees to go. At 1 degree per minute, the cargo would reach auto-ignition in 101 minutes, well past the impact timeline. But if the insulation had any microfractures from the reactor scram, the rate could double or triple. She filed the data and kept it in her peripheral awareness. One more variable on a board that was already too full of them. 2 clocks running now: the impact clock, which was the one everyone was watching, and the thermal migration clock, which was the one that would decide whether the deflection plan was a rescue operation or a funeral. A thought struck her. She opened the channel to Dockmaster Solen. Dockmaster, does Halcyon Ring have any external defense systems? Point defense turrets, debris-clearing lasers, anything rated for thermal interdiction? We have a single debris-clearing laser on the station's dorsal array. It is rated for objects up to 50 kilograms at ranges under 200 meters. It is designed for clearing bolt fragments and loose hull plating from the station's vicinity during maintenance operations. So it's useless against a 960-ton freighter. It would be the equivalent of pointing a flashlight at a mountain and asking it to move, Commander. Understood. Had to ask. I understand. We have also considered whether any of the docked vessels at Halcyon Ring could provide additional thrust if they were launched and directed toward the freighter. The answer is no. The remaining vessels in our docking cradles are small craft, cargo shuttles and personal transports, and none of them could reach the freighter before impact. The geometry is wrong. Copy. Focus on your shelter procedures. We'll handle the freighter. We are in your hands, Commander. I am not accustomed to being in anyone's hands. Vasquez almost said something to that, something reassuring, something about how the math was working, how the numbers were trending in the right direction. She didn't. Solen was a professional. She would know a comforting lie when she heard one, and the truth was that the math was close and the margins were thin, and nobody on this channel was in a position to promise anything. Understood, Dockmaster. TECP-14 out. 19 minutes, the Resolute arrived. Lieutenant Commander Wren brought the cutter in fast and hard, decelerating in a controlled burn that ate fuel she couldn't afford to waste, but saved seconds she couldn't afford to lose. On the telemetry feed, Vasquez watched the Resolute match velocity with the tumbling freighter, a precise piece of piloting that required compensating for the 2 RPM rotation, while maintaining parallel course at 400 meters per second. Resolute is alongside, Wren reported, deploying magnetic clamps to the freighter's dorsal hull. Clamp 1, contact secure. Clamp 2, contact secure. Clamp 3, a pause. Clamp 3 is not seating properly. The hull plating in this section is warped. Looks like thermal deformation from the reactor scram. The emergency shutdown vented superheated coolant through the dorsal exhaust ports and buckled the plating. Can you find an alternate attachment point? Switching to backup position, 20 meters aft. The plating here looks cleaner, no visible warping. A brief pause, then the sound of magnetic clamps engaging, a low metallic thud that carried through the comm as vibration more than noise. Clamp 3 contact secure. All 3 clamps locked. We are attached to the freighter's dorsal hull aft of centerline. Readings look solid. The hull is vibrating slightly. I think that's the 2 RPM rotation interacting with our lateral mass, setting up a harmonic. It's within structural tolerance. Does the harmonic affect the deflection calculation? Marginally. The oscillation means our effective thrust angle varies by about 0.2 degrees per rotation cycle. Averaged over the full burn duration, the net effect is negligible. But it does mean our projected deflection has a wider error bar than I'd like. 15 minutes. Both ships were on the freighter like barnacles on a whale made of metal and thermite that didn't know it had passengers and wouldn't have cared. Vasquez reviewed the full tactical picture one final time. 2 ships attached, the Resolute on the dorsal hull, the Briarwood on the ventral. Combined mass of the pushers, 480 tons. Mass of the thing being pushed, 2,060 tons. Speed, 400 meters per second. Distance to Halcyon Ring, 360 kilometers and closing. The numbers were clear and they were not generous. Resolute, Briarwood confirm you are both attached and ready for synchronized lateral burn. Briarwood confirms. Grapples holding, engines primed for lateral thrust. Resolute confirms. Magnetic clamps secure, lateral thrusters aligned perpendicular to trajectory. Updated deflection calculation, Wren added. With the Resolute's attachment point 20 meters aft of optimal, our thrust vector is slightly off-axis. Combined deflection estimate drops from 1.8 degrees to 1.7 degrees. Impact point shifts to 370 meters off the station's port side instead of 400. 370 meters, still a miss. Still a miss. Core safety margin is rated for 300 meters. We're 70 meters inside the margin. Execute the burn. Copy. Initiating synchronized lateral burn in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 burn. The telemetry display shifted. 2 thrust vectors appeared on the tracking overlay, the Briarwood pushing from below, the Resolute pushing from above, both perpendicular to the freighter's direction of travel. The combined thrust was a fraction of the freighter's momentum, but it was constant, and it was sustained, and degree by fraction of a degree, the projected impact point on the overlay began to drift away from the station's silhouette. Vasquez watched it move, slowly, so slowly that she had to check the overlay scale to make sure it was updating. The red dot crept across the projection, millimeter by millimeter on her screen, each millimeter representing dozens of meters at the impact point. The math was working. The physics was cooperating. 2 tiny ships were pushing against something that outmassed them combined by more than 3 to 1, and the universe was grudgingly allowing the angle to change. Deflection at 0.2 degrees, Wren reported. 0.3, 0.5. 13 minutes to impact. Vasquez watched the numbers climb with the kind of attention that blocks out everything else, the hum of the station's recyclers, Okafor's quiet breathing, the asteroid slowly rotating outside the viewport. Nothing existed except the numbers. 0.6, 0.7. 12 minutes. 0.9 degrees, 1.0. A brief interference pulse crossed the broadband, the Vethani Sector Coordination Center, checking in. TECP-14, this is Vethani Sector Control. We are monitoring your operation. Be advised the Solen's Grace has increased to maximum transit speed. Revised ETA, 47 minutes. Copy, Vethani Sector Control. 47 minutes is still 9 minutes after projected impact. We're proceeding with the deflection. Understood. We are monitoring. The channel went quiet, but Vasquez could feel them watching. An entire sector administration, the proper authority, sitting at their consoles 11 light minutes away, watching two human ships do the thing they couldn't get there in time to do. 1.1 degrees. Briarwood reporting grapple line stress at 82% of rated maximum, Teague cut in. Holding steady, no sign of degradation. But the freighter's hull is flexing slightly at the grapple attachment points. The plating wasn't designed for sustained lateral load. Will it hold? It'll hold for the duration of the burn. If pieces start shearing off after that, they'll be someone else's problem. 1.3 degrees, 1.5. Dockmaster Solen's voice came through on the broadband. Tighter now. The composure was still there, but it was costing her more. Commander Vasquez, Halcyon Ring Core shelter is complete. All 4,400 non-evacuated residents are secured in the reinforced section. Lifeboats have launched with 1,800 evacuees and are clearing to safe distance. The docking arm is clear of all personnel. The disabled cargo shuttle has been abandoned in place. Copy, Dockmaster. You did that in 11 minutes. That's impressive for a commercial platform. We have drilled this procedure quarterly for 4 years, Commander. I never expected to use it. The drills always felt like bureaucratic theater. They do not feel like theater now. No, ma'am, they wouldn't. The station's emergency medical team is standing by in the core with triage stations prepared. If there is thermal damage to the outer ring, there may be secondary fires and structural fragment injuries. Our fire suppression systems are rated for Class 2 incidents only: standard commercial fires, fuel leaks, electrical faults. Understood. If there are fires beyond your suppression capacity, the Resolute carries emergency response equipment. We'll have them on station within minutes of the event. If the Resolute survives the event. Vasquez didn't answer that directly. Stay on this channel, Dockmaster. 10 minutes. Deflection at 1.6 degrees, Wren said. Her voice was the same controlled flat that every trained officer defaulted to when the margin for error shrank below comfort. Briarwood, fuel state. 41% and burning. Will run dry in about 6.5 minutes at current rate. Resolute is at 54%. I can sustain for 8. When the Briarwood goes dry, I'll carry the burn solo for the remaining time. Vasquez did the math on her console. 6.5 minutes of combined thrust from both ships, then roughly 1.5 minutes of the Resolute alone. The deflection rate would drop by more than half when the Briarwood's engines died, because the tug's contribution, small as it was still 40% of their total lateral thrust, thanks to its position on the freighter's underside, providing better leverage against the center of mass. Projected final deflection if the Briarwood runs dry at the 6.5 minute mark, she asked. 1.68 degrees. Impact point at 350 meters. 350. 50 meters inside the core's rated safety margin of 300. Still a miss, but tighter than anyone wanted. What if we can squeeze another 30 seconds out of the Briarwood? Teague's voice came back. Commander, I can push the engines past their rated thermal limit. It'll give us maybe 40 extra seconds of thrust before the drive cones start warping. After that, we're done, not just out of fuel but out of engines. Do it. Copy. 8 minutes. The freighter was visible on the Resolute's external cameras now, the feed forwarded to Vasquez's tertiary monitor in grainy real time. The Cathali's dawn filled the frame, a dark, blunt wedge of Vethani-built hull plating, tumbling slowly in the reflected light of a nearby gas giant's albedo glow. No lights, no engine glow, no navigation markers, no running signals. Just mass and momentum and 1,100 tons of thermite catalyst sealed in a cargo bay that was slowly warming from the inside. Dead ship. Dead trajectory. The kind of object that, in a different context, would be classified as an asteroid and left alone. But asteroids didn't carry thermite, and asteroids didn't aim themselves at stations. The Briarwood was visible too, a tiny shape clamped to the freighter's underside like a remora on a shark. Its engine exhaust a steady white-blue cone burning against the dark hull. On the dorsal side, the Resolute's lateral thrusters left faint blue-white trails in the void, 3 columns of thrust from 3 positions along the cutter's keel, all pushing perpendicular to the freighter's trajectory. From a distance, it would have looked absurd, 2 small ships trying to shove a mountain sideways. From up close, through the camera feed, it looked like exactly what it was, the only option available. 7 minutes. Okafor spoke quietly from the secondary console. Commander, the thermal migration data just updated. Temperature at the cargo hold barrier is now 231 degrees. The rate of increase has accelerated slightly, 1.4 degrees per minute instead of 1. Either the insulation has a microfracture or the reactor residual heat is concentrating in a narrower band. How does that change the auto-ignition timeline? If the rate holds at 1.4, the cargo reaches auto-ignition in approximately 58 minutes from now. Still well past the impact timeline, but if the rate accelerates further, it doesn't matter if it ignites before impact or after DES. Either way, the deflection is what keeps the station alive. Understood, just keeping you informed. 6 minutes. The Briarwood's engines were beginning to show strain on the telemetry, exhaust temperature climbing, past the manufacturer's rated limit, drive cone thermal readings edging into amber. Captain Teague was pushing his tug past its design envelope, feeding it the last of its fuel at a rate that would leave nothing in reserve. Briarwood at 20% fuel, drive cone temperature at 118% of rated, holding thrust. Deflection at 1.62 degrees, Wren reported. 1.63. 5 minutes. The numbers were crawling now. Every 1/10 of a degree was bought with fuel and engine life, and the structural integrity of grapple lines that had never been asked to do this. 1.64. 4.5 minutes. The Briarwood's engines began to sputter, an irregular flutter in the exhaust cone that showed up on the telemetry as erratic thrust oscillations. Briarwood at 8% fuel. Drive cones are warping. I'm losing coherent thrust, maybe 60 seconds left. Hold it, Teague, hold it. Holding. 4 minutes, the flutter worsened. On the camera feed from the Resolute, Vasquez could see the Briarwood's exhaust cone visibly distorting, no longer a clean column of thrust, but a ragged, wavering spray of superheated propellant, losing coherence as the drive hardware warped under sustained thermal stress. The tug's thrust output dropped by 15%, then 20%. Teague's ship was burning itself out, not metaphorically, literally consuming its own engine hardware in the process of spending its last fuel, because that was what the math required, and that was what Teague had chosen to give it. Briarwood at 3%, engines are drive cone 2 just fractured. A rough metallic bang came through the audio, the kind of sound that means something structural has let go. I'm down to 1 engine. Maybe 10 seconds of thrust remaining. 10 seconds counts, Teague. Burn it. Burning. The Briarwood's single remaining engine fired for 7 more seconds. The sound through the comms channel was ugly, grinding, irregular, the sound of a machine being asked to do something past its design envelope and complying anyway because nobody had told it to stop. Then it stuttered twice and went dark. Briarwood is dry, Teague said. Engines are dead. Drive cones are fused. We're done, Commander. Grapple lines still holding. We're along for the ride now. Resolute maintaining solo lateral burn, Wren said. Deflection rate has dropped significantly without the Briarwood's contribution. We're now at 1.66 degrees and climbing slowly. Projected final deflection at my current fuel state, 1.71 degrees. Impact point at 355 meters. 355 meters. 55 meters inside the core's rated safety margin. A miss, technically, mathematically, but close enough that the difference between miss and hit was less than the length of the station's docking arm, and Vasquez's jaw was tight enough to ache. Okafor was doing something at his console, running his own parallel calculation, checking the numbers against a different model. After a moment, he looked up. "Commander, my independent projection agrees with the Resolute's. 1.71 degrees, 355 meters. Plus or minus 8 meters for the rotational harmonic. Plus or minus 8. The worst case puts the closest approach at 347 meters, still inside the 300-meter safety rating. And the best case, 363. More comfortable, but the thermal pulse difference between 347 and 363 is minimal. At either distance, the station's core holds. Good enough. 3 minutes. Briarwood, you need to detach." "Working on it, Commander. Grapple Release System 1 is responding. Line 1 free. Line 2 jammed. The stress warped the release actuator. Manual override. Trying now. 2 minutes 30 seconds. Line 2 is stuck. I'm sending my engineer out with a cutting tool." "You don't have time for a spacewalk, Teague." "It's not a spacewalk, Commander. It's an arms reach out the maintenance hatch. Cass is already in the lock." 2 minutes. Vasquez watched the tracking display. The Resolute was still burning, still pushing, but alone now. A 400-ton cutter wrestling a 2,000-ton dead freighter with diminishing fuel, and the certain knowledge that in about 90 seconds they needed to be somewhere else. Deflection at 1.69 degrees. "Resolute, you need to start thinking about your own detached timeline." 30 seconds, Commander. We detach at the 30-second mark and full burn away from the freighter. 1 minute 45 seconds. Line 2 cutting now. Teague's voice was strained. Vasquez could hear the whine of a handheld thermal cutter in the background, then a sharp crack, the grapple line parting under the combination of stress and cutting heat. Line 2 is free. Briarwood is detached from the freighter, but we've got no engines, Commander. We're drifting. Resolute, can you tow the Briarwood after detach? Negative, we won't have time. We'll be burning away from the freighter at maximum thrust. I'll circle back for the Briarwood after the event. 60 seconds. Deflection at 1.70 degrees. 45 seconds. 1.71. 30 seconds. All hands. Resolute brace for emergency detach and hard burn away from the freighter. Releasing clamps in 3, 2, 1. Clamps released. Full reverse burn. On the tracking display, the Resolute's blue icon separated from the freighter's red icon and accelerated away. Engines at maximum, putting distance between the cutter and the 2,000-ton incendiary projectile as fast as physics allowed. The Briarwood's icon drifted. No thrust, no control, just momentum carrying it along roughly the same vector as the freighter, slowly diverging. 20 seconds. 15. Vasquez gripped the edge of her console with both hands. Her knuckles were white. Okafor had stopped typing. He was standing now, both hands flat on his console, staring at the tracking display with the kind of attention that has nothing to do with professionalism, and everything to do with the fact that 6,000 people were about to find out whether 2 small ships had pushed hard enough. 10 seconds. On the Resolute's camera feed, Halcyon Ring filled the frame, a massive commercial platform, its lights still burning, its portside docking arm extending outward like an arm reaching toward the dark. And beyond the station, growing in the frame with the slow inevitability of something that cannot be stopped and can only be deflected, the dark mass of the Cathali's Dawn. 5 seconds. The Cathali's Dawn passed Halcyon Ring at 358 meters. The impact didn't come, but 11 seconds later, the thermite did. Whether it was the residual reactor heat finally breaching the compromised insulation, or gravitational tidal stress from the freighter's close pass near the station's mass well, or some confluence of both that no post-incident analysis would ever fully untangle, the thermite catalyst compound reached its critical threshold. 1,100 metric tons of industrial-grade incendiary cutting agent, enough to section a heavy cruiser's hull, enough to build 3 orbital shipyards, enough to turn a commercial space station into a ball of white fire, detonated in a flash that blanked every sensor on Vasquez's board for 6 full seconds. The screen went white, then gray, then black. Then the backup systems kicked in, and the data started flowing again. When the displays came back, the Cathali's Dawn was gone, not damaged, not tumbling, not breaking apart, gone. The thermite detonation had consumed the freighter entirely. 960 tons of Vethani hull plating, structural alloy, cargo bay framing, reactor shielding, and the cold dead engines that had started all of this. All of it converted into expanding plasma and a sphere of superheated shrapnel blooming outward at velocities that the tracking system could measure, but that the human mind could only approximate. Halcyon Ring was still there. The station's reinforced core was intact. The outer ring, the port side facing the detonation, showed severe thermal scarring along its entire length. Hull plating was blackened and buckled. 2 docking cradles had warped beyond repair, their structural members sagging inward like melted fingers. An antenna array was reduced to slag. The disabled cargo shuttle that had been abandoned in the docking arm had ignited and was burning in its berth, its own fuel adding a secondary fire to the thermal damage. But the station's emergency suppression systems were handling it. The structure held. The Resolute had cleared the detonation radius by 112 meters. Close. Too close by any standard Vasquez had ever been taught. The cutter's aft hull showed thermal blistering across 40% of its surface area. The paint had bubbled, the sensor fairings had warped, and one of its 2 sensor masts was gone entirely, sheared off by a piece of freighter debris moving at several hundred meters per second. A second piece had punched through the aft lifeboat housing, destroying the lifeboat but not breaching the pressure hull. The cutter's chief engineer was already running damage reports, his voice steady on the internal channel as he cataloged what was broken and what could wait. But the hull was intact. The crew was alive, all 19 of them. The Briarwood had not been as fortunate. The tug's late detach and complete lack of propulsion had left it drifting on the freighter's old vector, slowly diverging but not fast enough. When the thermite detonated, the Briarwood was still within 460 meters of the blast center, well inside the 200-meter danger zone that Akafer's thermal model had flagged. The pulse struck the tug's portside full-on, like a furnace door opening onto an already battered hull. The Briarwood's outer plating held, barely. The hull design, standard Terran Maritime Authority specifications, built for durability in the kind of environments where tugs work, absorbed the thermal load at the cost of buckling 2 portside panels and fusing a maintenance hatch shut. But the interior cooling systems in the portside compartments couldn't handle the surge. The temperature in the portside engineering bay spiked past survivable limits in less than 3 seconds. 2 of Captain Teague's 4 crew members had been in that bay. Engineer's mate Kosharan, the one who had reached through the maintenance hatch to cut the jammed grapple line, the one who had gotten them free, was cycling back through the inner lock when the thermal pulse hit. The hatch warped around him. Systems technician Pella Vostok had been beside the dead engine console, running the shutdown sequence that would prevent the fused drive cones from causing secondary damage. Vasquez heard Teague's voice on the channel 32 seconds after the detonation. Flat, controlled. The kind of controlled that costs something you don't get back. Briarwood to TECP-14. We are intact but damaged. Hull breach in portside engineering contained by emergency bulkhead. 2 crew members with severe thermal injuries. Haran and Vostok, both conscious, both in significant pain, requesting immediate medical assistance. Resolute, divert to the Briarwood for medical response. Already en route, Wren said quietly. 3 minutes. We have burn treatment supplies and a stabilization bay. We'll get them. Get them fast, Resolute. We will. Vasquez closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. When she opened them, the clock on her console read 14:49. 40 minutes since the garbled signal had first landed on her board. 40 minutes since she'd set down her coffee and leaned forward. She sat at her console and managed the aftermath. She coordinated the Resolute's medical team with the Briarwood, confirmed the stabilization bay was prepped, confirmed the burn treatment supplies included regenerative dermal patches rated for thermal injuries above 400 degrees, confirmed that the Resolute's medical officer, a woman named Ibanez who had been a civilian trauma surgeon before she joined the Maritime Authority, was scrubbing in and preparing for 2 critical patients. She filed the Grade 1 incident report on the broadband, a procedural requirement that felt absurd in the immediate aftermath, but that she did anyway because the procedures were the thing that held the rest of it together. And if she stopped doing the procedures, she would have to think about what had just happened, and she did not have time for that yet. She logged the detonation telemetry. She recorded the Resolute's damage report. She confirmed that the Maddox Crest, the civilian rock hauler, had recovered the Cathalis Dawn's escape pod and its 3 Vethani crew members, alive and uninjured, pulled from the void 40 kilometers behind the expanding debris cloud that used to be their ship. Dockmaster Solène contacted her again, 41 minutes after the detonation. The formal tone was back, but something underneath it had changed. The architecture of the conversation was the same: clipped, professional, procedurally precise, but the foundation had shifted. Commander Vasquez, Halcyon Ring Station Control confirms structural integrity of the reinforced core. All 6,214 sheltered and evacuated residents are accounted for. No casualties. Exterior damage to the portside outer ring is extensive but repairable. The secondary fire in the docking arm has been suppressed. Acknowledged, Dockmaster. The Vethani Trade Authority vessel, Solène's Grace, has arrived in the sector and is assuming jurisdiction over the debris field and the Cathalis Dawn escape pod recovery. Copy. We'll transfer our full telemetry and incident logs to them. Commander, Solène paused. When she spoke again, the clipped diction had softened by a fraction, not much, but enough for Vasquez to notice. I have reviewed the complete routing log for the Cathalis Dawn's distress signal. The original SOS was transmitted at 14:07 station time on Vethani Emergency Channel 3. It was received by our Sector Coordination Center at 14:08. The Solène's Grace was dispatched at 14:11 from the refueling depot at Keth Sorrel. Its estimated arrival was 15:02. 51 minutes from the initial call. Yes, the response was proper. The correct vessel dispatched from the correct authority on the correct timeline. It was simply not fast enough. No, ma'am. It wasn't. The degraded echo of that same SOS reached your station via the decommissioned relay marker 7714 at 14:09. 1 minute after we received the original. Your cutter altered course at 14:11, the same minute we dispatched the Solène's Grace. Your tug was already burning for Halcyon Ring by 14:12. The Briarwood arrived at the freighter at 14:22. The Resolute arrived at 14:25. The deflection burn began at 14:26. The freighter cleared the station at 14:48. The thermite detonated at 14:48 and 11 seconds. She recited the numbers with the precision of someone who had already memorized them, who would probably remember them for the rest of her life. The Solène's Grace arrived at 15:03, 15 minutes after the event. The station was still standing. Those are the times, Dockmaster. Your ships were never asked to come. Vasquez looked at her console. The waveform display still showed the garbled original transmission, cycling on its 12-second loop. A broken signal from a relay that should have been pulled out of service 11 years ago. A wrong number call that had landed on the desk of a two-person outpost where a woman was drinking coffee at the edge of human space. No, Dockmaster, we were not asked. I will be filing a formal report with the Vethani Trade Authority regarding the decommissioned relay and the jurisdictional implications of this event. There will be questions about protocol, about boundaries, about why a Terran SAR cutter was magnetically clamped to a Vethani-registered freighter in a Vethani-administered corridor. I expect there will be. But before I file that report in here, for just a moment, the bureaucrat fell away, and the dockmaster who had spent the last hour watching a freighter full of thermite hurtling toward her home was the one speaking. I want you to know that 6,214 people are alive because a signal went where it was not supposed to go, and the person who received it did not wait for permission to act on it. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. I was just the one sitting at the desk, Dockmaster. The Resolute and the Briarwood did the work. The Briarwood's crew paid for it. Yes, they did. 2 injured. Both in critical condition but stabilized. The Resolute's medical team has them, and they're en route to Meridian Hospital Station. I will ensure the Vethani Trade Authority is aware of what those crew members endured, and on whose behalf. The channel went quiet. Vasquez turned to Akafor, who was sitting with his hands folded in his lap, watching the tracking display where the blue icon of the Resolute was pulling away from the debris field, the dark silhouette of the damaged Briarwood magnetically docked to its hull for the trip to the hospital. Des. Yeah. Log the decommissioned relay marker 7714 for the Terran Maritime Authority's Infrastructure Review Board. Recommend immediate physical inspection and either full reactivation or permanent removal. No more ghost status. Which one do you think they'll pick? She considered it. A relay that had sat in the dark for 11 years, listed as inactive, never worth the fuel cost to retrieve. A forgotten piece of infrastructure that had done the only thing it still knew how to do when a dying signal passed through its coverage zone: catch it, strip the broken header, and pass it to the nearest open frequency. The nearest open frequency had been hers. I don't know, she said, but it shouldn't sit there as nothing. Either take it offline for real or put it back to work. Akafor nodded and began typing. 3 days later, the Terran Maritime Authority issued its preliminary findings. The report was 17 pages, filed under case number TMA 7714 Palladian, and it covered the routing anomaly, the jurisdictional overlap, the deflection operation, and the thermite detonation in exhaustive detail. Page 7 contained a timeline. Page 9 contained the deflection calculations. Page 12 contained the damage assessment for both the Briarwood and the Resolute. Page 14 contained the report's single recommendation, buried between a paragraph about fuel cost reimbursement and a note about updating the diplomatic frequency sharing protocols. Relay marker 7714, currently listed as decommissioned, should be physically inspected. If functional, it should be reintegrated into the Terran Deep Range Emergency Network and its coverage zone formally registered with all treaty signatories. The cost of maintaining one additional relay is negligible compared to the cost of the alternative. The Vethani Trade Authority filed its own report, 23 pages, same material, opposite jurisdictional perspective. At the end, a formal diplomatic communication was transmitted to the Terran Maritime Authority. It was 3 sentences long. The Vethani Trade Authority acknowledges receipt of Terran Maritime Authority case number TMA 7714 Palladian. The authority notes that the Terran vessels TSV Resolute and TAV Briarwood responded to a signal that was not addressed to them, under no treaty obligation requiring such response. The authority further notes that 6,214 individuals are alive as a result. No objection was filed. No jurisdictional complaint was raised. No request for compensation. No demand for a formal apology. No suggestion that the Terran response had been unwelcome or inappropriate. The communication was entered into the diplomatic record without additional comment, and the file was closed. 3 weeks after the incident, Dockmaster Solen sent a private communication to Commander Vasquez at TECP-14. It was not an official document. It was not filed with any trade authority or diplomatic archive. It was a short message, 4 sentences long, and Vasquez read it at her console on a quiet morning while the asteroid rotated slowly outside her viewport, and Akefer replaced another water filter in the maintenance bay. The message said, "The Halcyon Ring Port Authority has completed repairs to the outer ring. Docking operations have resumed. The station's emergency drill schedule has been updated to include coordination protocols with Terran emergency networks. I thought you would want to know." Vasquez read it twice, then filed it in her personal log. She did not reply. There was nothing to say that had not already been said by the numbers. Captain Teague received a formal commendation from the Terran Maritime Authority for exceptional initiative and professional competence in the execution of an unplanned emergency deflection operation under extreme time constraints. Lieutenant Commander Wren and every member of the Resolute's crew received the same. The Briarwood herself was drydocked for 4 months, new drive cones, new portside hull plating, a complete replacement of the interior cooling system in the engineering bay. When she returned to service, she was the same 60-ton harbor tug she had always been, rated for pushing disabled cargo pods and clearing debris from shipping lanes. Nothing about her designation had changed. Vasquez received the same commendation. She put it in a drawer at TECP-14, next to the spare power couplings and a half-empty box of coffee filters. Engineers Mate Kos Heron and systems technician Pella Vostok were treated at Meridian Hospital Station over the following 6 weeks. Both survived. Heron's burns required 3 reconstructive procedures and left scarring across his forearms and chest that the regenerative patches could not fully repair. Vostok lost partial use of her left hand, the hand that had been on the engine shutdown console when the thermal pulse hit, but returned to active duty 8 months later. She requested reassignment to the Briarwood. Her request was approved. Relay marker 7714 was inspected 4 months after the incident. The relay was found to be fully functional. Its hardware had degraded only marginally in 11 years of disuse. The inspection team reactivated it, updated its firmware, and registered its coverage zone with every treaty signatory in the Palladian Drift. It is still listening.